Say amen for him.
Amen. First of all, I would like to give thanks to the pastor and his wife. I'd like to give thanks to all the mothers and to all that it takes to make this congregation. My topic for the day is in the midst of the storm. Your storm is whatever your problem is. Your storm is whatever your situation is. Before you get to heaven, you're going to go through some storms. You're going to get some scars. I got scars in the church just like I got scars in the world. We're going to start with Saul, Acts 7:58-60. And they cast him out the city and stoned him. And the witness laid down their clothes at a young man's feet named Saul. In Acts 7:6 it says, and they stoned Stephen, calling upon God and saying, Lord Jesus, receive thy spirit. And Saul didn't know that he was in the midst of a storm. Saul was a Jewish leader who believed that those who followed Jesus was blaspheming God. And Saul was born in Tyre, about 5 AD, in the city of Silica. He was born to Jewish parents who possessed Roman citizenship. He was a Pharisee. In about 10 AD, Saul's family moved to Jerusalem. In about 15 or 20 AD, Saul began to study the Hebrew scripture in the city of Jerusalem with a rabbi named Gabriel who taught him the law, and Saul mastered the law. Saul sat on the highest court in the land, the Sanhedrin court. He was the Pharisee of the Pharisees who persecuted the Jewish people. And Saul sent letters to the king to get permission to go to Damascus and Samaria to persecute the Jews. And Saul was the second most powerful man in Jerusalem. And Paul, which is the same as Saul, he spoke several languages: Hebrew, Arabic, Portuguese, Latin, German, French, Greek. Paul wrote 13 of the 27 books in the New Testament. Paul wrote 13 letters to the Christian church. Paul went on 3 missionary journeys. Saul was in the midst of a storm when he met God on the road to Damascus to persecute the Jews. A bright light shined down on him and knocked him off his horse. God spoke to Saul. Acts 9:4 said, Saul, Saul, why persecute me? And Acts 9:5 says, and he said, who art thou, Lord? And the Lord said, I'm Jesus whom you persecute. I know it's hard for you to kick against the prick. And Saul was blind for 3 days. God told Saul to go down to Damascus, go to a street called Straight Street and ask for a man by the name of Ananias, and he will give you a sight. And Saul got his sight. And Saul was in the midst of a storm. What do you do when you're in the midst of a storm? You run for cover. You find a hiding place. You try to get in a higher ground. You listen to good advice. And Saul listened to good advice because he came to Damascus to kill, destroy, and persecute. But he wound up preaching, teaching, and delivering. Don't tell me what God can't do in the midst of a storm. And after Saul spoke to God on the road to Damascus, his name was changed to Paul. And after the Roman government realized that Paul had did no wrong, they requested he be sent back to Rome to see Caesar. And so they sent Paul back to Rome. But on his way to Rome, he was in the midst of a storm. The ship was carrying 266 passengers, cargo and travelers. But at midnight, the ship near a city called Andrea, Acts 27:30-31 says, as the shipman was about to flee the ship, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except those who abide in the ship cannot be saved. As the ship began to sink, they threw out cargo overboard to make the ship lighter. The ship broke up into hundreds of pieces. Everyone on the ship grabbed hold of the pieces of the ship as the ship crashed on an island called Malta. All 260 people were saved. No souls was lost in the midst of the storm. Did you hear me? A ship full of people, a ship broken up in the midst of a storm. No souls was lost. Acts 28 says, and when Paul gathered, before I get to that, the people on the island of Malta was barbarian peoples. They had lost touch with society. It was cold, it was raining, it was windy. Now Acts 28:3 says, and when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, then came a viper out of the heat and fastened to his hand. The barbarian people said, this man must be a murderer. And Paul shook the snake off into the fire. And then they called him a god. The barbarian people were waiting for Paul to swell up and die. Paul healed one of the men in the barbarian tribe, and they called him a healer. The barbarian people went from calling Paul a murderer to calling him a god, to calling him a healer. In the midst of the storm, you got to shake it off. You got to shake it off in the midst of the storm. When you get sick, you got to shake it off. When you get in trouble, you got to shake it off. When you get a problem, you got to shake it off. Shake it off in the midst of the storm. My next passage is coming out of Matthew 14. Jesus was walking down the shores of Galilee when he chose his 12 disciples. Simon Peter, Andrew his brother, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew the publican, Thaddeus, James the son of Alphaeus, Simon the Canaanite, Judas Iscariot. In the midst of the storm, Jesus and his disciples got on a ship going to Jerusalem. Jesus left the ship and went up to the mountain and prayed. When Jesus came down from the mountain, the ship had drifted out in the high water. A darkness came up on the ship. It was so dark they couldn't see their hand. A storm came. It was a mighty storm. The thunder was so loud it could be heard for miles. The light was so bright it lit up the sky. The wind blew so hard the boat turned upside down. It rained so hard the boat began to sink. And Jesus walked on the water up to the ship in the midst of the storm. His disciples was amazed that Jesus could walk on water. Jesus spoke to the storm. He said, peace, be still. The rain stopped. The wind stopped. The thunder and lightning stopped. The disciple looked at each other and said, even the wind, the rain, and the storm obey him. And Peter said to Jesus, give me the power to heal the sick. Give me the power to raise the dead. Give me the power to open blind eyes in the midst of the storm. My next passage is coming out of Acts 3. And God spoke to Peter in the midst of the storm. Peter healed a crippled man. Peter and John would walk to the synagogue every day to pray. This man was crippled from birth. Somebody or someone would push him every day to the church gate, which was called Beautiful. And he would sit there and he would beg all day. One day, the beggar asked Peter for some money. Peter got so upset with the beggar, he yelled at the beggar. He said, silver and gold I have none, but what I have I give thee. I command you in the name of Jesus Christ, get up and walk. The man got up and tried to walk, but he fell back down. He tried to walk again, and he fell back down again. As Peter prayed and touched the crippled man, he began to walk. The crippled man began to jump. The crippled man began to run. He ran so fast they couldn't catch him. He was running. He was jumping. He was leaping for joy. That's what happens when you trust in God and you can't, and you're in the midst of the storm. God will protect you no matter what your storm is. The biggest storm was that he couldn't walk. But God protected him in the midst of his storm. My next passage is coming out of 1 Kings 18. God sent an angel to Elijah in the midst of the storm. The prophet Elijah had a showdown with the 450 false prophets of Baal to see which God was the true and living God. Each prophet had to build an altar to see which God would start the fire. And God started off with the God that answered the fire will be the true and living God. And Baal called on his God first, but nothing happened. He called on his God from morning to night. Still nothing happened. They leaped, they screamed, they jumped on the altar. Still nothing happened. Elijah mocked them. He said, maybe they're asleep and need to be awakened. He said, maybe they left. They cut themselves, but still nothing happened. And then it came to Elijah's turn. Elijah called on God, and God sent down the help from heaven. God sent down fire from heaven and burned up everything. The fire burned up the stone, the wood, even burned up the water in the altar. Elijah had the 450 prophets killed. When the king's wife Jezebel heard what happened, she said to Elijah, if I don't kill you by this time today, I will definitely kill you by tomorrow. When Elijah heard that Jezebel was looking for him, he took off running from a woman in the desert. A man who just killed 450 prophets was running from a woman. See something to think about there. Elijah had got so tired of running, he laid under a juniper tree and told God that he wanted to die. An angel touched Elijah, cooked food for him, and told him to eat and drink. And Elijah did eat and drink. Elijah fell asleep again. The angel of the Lord touched him for a second time and told him to eat because the journey was 40 days long and 40 nights. Elijah had given up on God, but the angel touched Elijah in the midst of the storm and brought him back home. My next passage is coming out of Acts 12. And God sent an angel to Peter in the midst of the storm. King Herod was afraid of Peter and John. He wanted to be popular with the Jewish people. He told Peter and John to stop teaching and preaching about King Jesus. They refused to stop. He had them arrested in public and thrown in prison. And King Herod wanted to make sure that Peter and John would not get out of prison. He had 16 soldiers guarding 3 gates in the prison gate. And Peter had to trust in God because he was carrying a heavy load. He was on the run from Herod for preaching the gospel. And Peter was put in jail. But the church people were still praying for Peter. Mary, John, Martha, and Rhoda was praying for Peter every single night. The night before Herod was to bring Peter to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers. Peter had chains put around his waist and feet, and he was chained between 2 guards, and the soldier stood outside the gate. Just when Herod thought he had Peter shed out, but it couldn't keep God from coming in. I'm in the midst of the storm. The midst of the storm. An angel showed up and shined a bright light in his cell. The chains popped off his wrist. The chain popped off his feet. The chain popped off his hand. Psalm 35 says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. I said, it's morning time. Joy will come in the morning. Do you have peace? Do you have joy? 2 Corinthians 2:7 says, for we walk by faith, but not by sight. Peter was walking by faith. How are you walking? Trust in God, he will take the load off. Trust in God, he will set you free. Trust in God, he will fight your battle. Trust in God, he will protect you from your enemy. The angel took Peter by the hand in the midst of the storm, and they began to walk. He was walking, he went through the first gate. The gate swung right open. He was walking, he went through the second gate, and the gate swung right open. He was walking, he went through the third gate, which was the iron gate. The gate was so heavy, it took several minutes to open it, but the gate swung open on one accord, and Peter walked right out. The angel led Peter to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, while they was praying for Peter that same night, for him to get released from prison. Peter knocked on the door. Nobody believed it was Peter. Rhoda opened the door and Peter walked in. King Herod was looking from a distance. It looked like he had seen a ghost. He was trying to figure out how in the world did this man go through all these gates and nobody seen him. The angel brought Peter out into the midst of the storm, because God can do the impossible. God can do the impossible. Now, Gideon was a judge. Gideon was a coward. He had no military experience. God sent an angel to Gideon in the midst of the storm as he sat on an oak tree to let him know that he didn't need a large army to defeat his enemy. Gideon started off with 35,000 soldiers, but he defeated his army with 300 soldiers. There's nothing that an angel can do. There's nothing that an angel cannot do in the midst of a storm. I'm going to leave you, but I'm going to leave you with a question before I leave out of here. And I want to know, have you ever given up in the midst of a storm and an angel came to help you? That's one question. Have God ever sent you an angel in the midst of a storm? Well, God sent an angel to me. God sent an angel to me just the other night. I was doing some of my daily activities. When I came home, I didn't feel dizzy, but all of a sudden my nose started running. I couldn't stop it. And my nose has bleeded a little bit before in the past, but not like that. My nose was just running extremely. And I said, God has sent me an angel in the midst of the storm. And I called 911. They came. They packed my nose, and its blood still wouldn't stop. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know I didn't want God to take me with this early, but I started to pray and ask God to forgive me for whatever I've done, whatever sin I committed. I ask for forgiveness because in the midst of the storm, God will forgive you. And God forgave me when I got to the hospital. They took me in the room and they stuffed the same packet that I packed in my nose, but they put a clip on my nose. In about 35, 40 minutes, the blood stopped. When I honked up, a big hunk of blood came out. But in the midst of the storm, God protected me. God will protect you in the midst of the storm. Like when Paul grabbed that snake and shook it off in the midst of the storm. He shook it off. When something happened to you, I want you to shake it off.
Shake it off. Amen. Thank God. Thank God. Amen. We thank God for Elder Williams. Amen. Thank God for his word. Amen. God for his word. Thank God for Elder Williams teaching and preaching the word of God. Amen. God is good. And I just thank God for everybody who pressed their way. Thank God for another day. Amen. God is so good. Amen. This brings the end of our Friday night service.